As reported by his physician, towards the end of his life when in ill health, the great Latin American revolutionary Simón Bolívar reportedly said the following: "The three greatest fools in human history are Jesus Christ, Don Quixote, and me." Interesting quote, isn't it? And why do I bring up this quote? Because I think that if Bolivar was indeed telling the truth, then there is a fourth person to add to that list, and that is the recently deceased Coach Red Pill. I think time has made a fool of Coach Red Pill. Now, when I say the word fool, I don't mean it in the modern, insulting sense of the term. Rather, I mean it in the older, literary sense of the term, in the same way that the Spanish word majadero is used. That is, someone who pursues grandiose ideas against the current, and an almost sort of effortless defiance, if you will. That is what I'm talking about. And so, why do I say that Coach Red Pill has been made a fool? Well, let's get into this. So, he came out as a big Trump supporter, a huge Donald Trump supporter. A lot of people did. And why is that? One of the main talking points of Donald Trump, particularly back in 2016, was anti-imperialism. Donald Trump pretended to be an anti-imperialist, or at least he was at the time. It was always destined to be a lie, and I'm going to explain why. Even if Trump at the time believed what he was saying. So the promise was no more wars, no more regime changes, no more getting entangled in all of this foreign nonsense, and instead focusing on building up America, building economic opportunities at home for the people here, rather than spending trillions of dollars abroad maintaining an empire that only benefits the corporate elite, many of which aren't even necessarily American corporate elite, I might add. Nestle, for example, is not an American corporation. They're Italian. So, the promise that Donald Trump gave of anti-imperialism and economic prosperity at home was what sucked in a lot of people, one of them being Coach Red Pill. Now, ever since then, Donald Trump has proven to be perhaps the most imperial president they've ever had since at least maybe Andrew Jackson. And why is that? A man who literally got in on an anti-imperialism sort of policy or framework turns out to be the most imperial president they've ever had. Well, it's tied to material interests. You see, this is where people need to take Karl Marx seriously, and in particular, I would argue, Louis Althusser seriously. Here is why. Karl Marx talked about what he called the base, which is the material sort of side of society, factories, farms, mines, bakeries, these sorts of things. And then he also talked about what is the sort of immaterial side of society, the world of ideas, if you will, and that is the superstructure. The superstructure is subordinate to the base. What does that mean exactly? Sort of very wordy, sort of, in-house sort of language. But here's an example. Britain goes off and conquers abroad. The ideological reason for the British Empire was spreading civilization, helping these natives who couldn't possibly help themselves, despite the fact that certain places like India, for example, were responsible for the invention of zero, the numeral zero. So, They go abroad and they do this, but the material motive behind it is markets, resources, land, settlement, so on and so forth. And so there's always going to be this sort of interaction between the base and the superstructure. Okay, so when we apply that to the individual, an individual, when it comes to his religion or his beliefs or whatever, kind of doesn't believe it a little bit, if we take into account Martha Louis Althusser. So, here's an example. My interests, my material interests, where I get my money, or how I get my money, is going to align with my ideology. And if my ideology and them don't align, sooner or later, they will align. And it's because of the simple fact of the social reproduction. This is what Martha or Karl Marx talked about. So here's an example. Let's say morally a person places playing guitar all day as the highest on their list morally. But in reality, they must put their material interests first. They have to. And why is that? Because in order for them to actually be able to sit around and play guitar all day, let alone actually have a guitar to begin with, they need to have their material needs met. Housing, food, and so on and so forth. And so this applies to Donald Trump. Donald Trump could never have been anything other than the imperialist that he has turned out to be. Venezuela, the disaster in Gaza, the recent war with Iran, and so on and so forth. Why is that? Because Donald Trump is an international businessman. He is international capital. That is how he makes his money. His companies worldwide own resorts, casinos, golf courses, properties that they flip, and so on and so forth. This means that whether or not he is against the empire, his material interests are aligned with that very empire that he came out critiquing. And that means that where there is a contradiction, sooner or later, that contradiction would be undone, and he would have to choose a side. And he has chosen his side. He has chosen his material interests. And in many ways, a person does not choose their material interests. Their material interests are chosen for them. And so, that is my point, is that without that material analysis of people, figures, and corporations, and so on and so forth, and instead relying on crap like values or virtues, you end up like Coach Red Pill, being made a fool and joining the trinity, which is now a quad of fools within human history.